Hey guys, tonight we unravel the enchanting, almost surreal tale of Ethiopian gold, the story that once left ancient Greek travelers gobsmacked. Picture this, a vast stretch of Ethiopian wilderness, its soil shimmering under the sun as if scattered with tiny golden stars. The ancient Ethiopians, armed with tales passed down through generations, believed these treasures were gifts from colossal ants dwelling beneath the ground. A sense of mystery blankets the land as whispers of this myth linger beneath the surface. Of course, in true bedtime story fashion, you probably won't survive this. Maybe too relaxed before the end credits roll. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the imagined sands of yesteryear Ethiopia, where every grain seems more alive under the mystical influence of ancient tales. Among these whispers, the most enticing is the legend of gigantic ants bringing up gold from the underworld, a charming, if not slightly bewildering notion. But was it ever more than just a tale? Like any good bedtime story, this one dances on the edge of dream and reality, leaving us guessing well after our heads hit the pillow. According to tales heard round old campfires, these mighty ants were thought to excavate mountains of gold beneath the Ethiopian sun. The terrain itself, much like the characters in these stories, was rich and varied, a testament to Earth's extraordinary natural tapestry. Some say these tales may have woven links between human endeavor and nature's raw power, symbolizing efforts and unimaginable dreams. As we dig deeper, literally and figuratively, we find an odd yet compelling fringe detail. Ancient reports allege the so-called ants were perhaps not insects at all, but rather sizable burrowing mammals like marmots or possibly the gleaming minerals themselves, crystalline tricks cunningly disguised. Historians still argue whether the ancients might have misinterpreted such natural phenomena. These kinds of academic debates often run like a spirited soap opera for history buffs, but they sure inject life into what could simply be deemed dusty old tales. And, of course, that's the charm of myths. They're sticky with exaggerations that leave us questioning and wanting. Embracing the mystery, you may find yourself swirling in a world where myth and material intertwined, influencing an entire civilization's beliefs and practices. For the Ethiopians, as with many ancient cultures, myths like these were more than diversions. They were the living breath of their reality. This story of golden ants hinted at more than just shiny metal. It whispered of a world where imagination enriched life as vibrantly as any precious artifact. Picture a traveler of old, hearing this tale for the first time, their eyes widening at the imagery of creatures traversing the earth's depths to unearth its secret treasures. Such stories were not simply passed around for leisure. They served as vessels of value, teaching lessons, inspiring wonder, cementing cultural ideals, and, yes, sparking dreams sometimes bigger than the very earth the tales emerge from. And yet, paradoxically, even a yarn so fantastical as gold-bearing ants might shade in grains of reality. As the explorer Herodotus chronicled, these tales might have been based partially on truth, his narratives blending exotic elements with otherwise unknowable cultures. After all, Herodotus was somewhat akin to today's roving vloggers, albeit with less camera equipment and slightly longer scrolls. Diving into the imaginative pool of Ethiopia's past is a bit like plunging your hands into the glittering sands hoping to pull up something real. Gold, in every glittery tale, was more than just metal. It was the resinous bounty of the earth, infused with the reverence of the people who prized it as divine favor. Picture an ancient ruler basking in the golden glow, not just of wealth, but of mythical storytelling born warmed by roaring fires and history's dim echoes. As you drift closer to the end of this golden path, consider how timeless such myths truly are. Imagining giant ants much like visualizing rainbows leading to pots of gold. Unlikely, yet wonderfully captivating. This tender dance between belief and disbelief, between what can be seen and what is invented, is the very essence of histories woven in wonder. Even as we prepare to set this ancient tapestry of tales aside, its vibrance echoes through time, its golden threads catching the light of our curiosity. Perhaps in another life, perhaps in a dream, you might walk this Ethiopian landscape yourself, eyes wide with wonder just as they were thousands of years past. Unending, the spell of these stories endures, even in the quietest corners of a world far more ordinary, but for creatives like you, never less extraordinary. Picture yourself in a time long before smartphones, or even bifocals, when whispers of ancient wonders lingered on the lips of those who still marveled at the world in all its raw mystique. You're not navigating bustling city streets with that hopeful glimpse of your Ubers. You know, that questionable car alignment, but rather wandering a landscape where the line between legend and life got as blurry as your eyes after a long day. Journey with me, dear relaxed traveler, through the heart and history of Ethiopia, where myths whispered through the winds and belief was as golden as the tales told. You're about to take a stroll through an age, a whimsical one full of tales told not just under the cover of night, but in the beating heart of life and culture. To live in a time where the ancient Ethiopians thrived, dancing the delicate dance between known truths and the more fantastical fabrications that found fertile soil in the collective imagination. In this mesmerizing epoch, belief systems were like that trendy water in a box. You'd think there can't be anything new, yet here we are. Ethiopian beliefs were infused with a delightful mix of awe and practicality, where everyday life seamlessly intertwined with the narratives of giant ants hauling shiny nuggets from the bowels of the earth. Perhaps our modern fascination with giant robots isn't so misplaced after all. Each tale of marvel served as a thread within the tapestry of life, shaping not only personal identity but national culture, fostering an environment where truths were as much felt as they were known. The legends were not mere entertainment. They belonged to the very fabric of community, woven into the ethos of markets, councils, and even casual gatherings over an earthy brew. Once you're ensconced in this time of wonder, you can't help but get swept up in the fervor of an era that challenged the banality of existence with stories vibrant as the colorful threads of traditional garb. Life was more than just routine survival. It was an exercise in immersion within a greater narrative. This period catapulted myth into the realm of reality in such convincing forms that, for the sake of wonder, even today's historians with their tactfully trimmed beards and sharp spectacles occasionally find themselves scratching their heads trying to disentangle fact from the imaginative. But let's not forget, dear traveler, that we exist in a realm of myth. The stories that echoed through Ethiopia were not neatly cataloged, sorted, and filed, as if the Moroccan librarians of old had way too much time on their hands. Rather, these myths flourished naturally across a landscape steeped in both magic and memory, each story providing yet another piece to the puzzle of a people's identity. Historians still argue whether this culture was as intent on chronicling actual events or if they skillfully explored the art of storytelling as a craft all its own. The lines between history and fantasy lay sketched in the sand much like the child's first draft of a grand castle. Myth served as a storytelling voyage. Thus, tales spun in Ethiopian markets weren't static echoes of an unchanging past, but evolving chronicles, picking up nuances here and punchlines there, just like that absurd chain email from your slightly clueless uncle. Remember him? Everyone's got one. And so here we glide, through an era less charted by borders and more indicated by oral traditions. These were centuries spent in a dreamscape where time wore a different hue, an ochre gleam perhaps, reminiscent of the gold aurora streaking across plains and into people's stories. With each step back, you witness firsthand the melding of myth and human experience, where tales consoled as they confounded, cautioned as they coerced, and eventually captured the hearts of generations. There's something altogether serene and slightly comical about a time when truth seemed more flexible, swirling and shifting under the tutelage of that most capricious of all masters, human imagination. As you wander back through that dreamy epoch, imagine shaking the hand, or paw, of those mythical gold-digging ants, imperfectly understanding that they are both ridiculous and somehow strangely believable. To be an ancient Ethiopian was perhaps to live in perpetual adventure, not so different than keeping up with the ever-bending timeline of today's popular TV series. Their symbiotic relationship with myth allowed them the luxury of a reality enhanced, a tangible reminder that life in all its splendor doesn't always require truth to be verifiable by scientific rigor. Sometimes all it takes is an imaginative explanation, much like why that one stubborn sock disappears in the dryer. Indeed, sometimes myths and reality blur so well that even our era might benefit by dusting off those storybooks and letting loose the imagination. Take a folklore-filled wander through your own mental maps for a while. You might just find some ancient ants of your own nudging a nugget or two into your own unfolding narrative. So, under those Ethiopian stars, where myths converged with reality, we're left with gold, not just the kind beneath your feet or buried under truths long traded, but the kind gleaming within, encouraging us all to blur our own lines, dreamily, gently, across time. But wait, what is this gleam? Never mind. It's simply a glisten of dream dust. Your journey into the past is but a whisper now, a quiet echo that carries across the sands and settles softly into tomorrow. With your feet firmly planted in the rich soil of antiquity, you marvel at the fascination ancient civilizations held for gold, that shimmering resin of the earth. It seduced societies like a shiny object tempts a magpie, irresistibly. The glint of gold wasn't mere superficial allure. It enchanted and bewitched entire cultures, asserting itself as both impressive adornment and celestial currency. You can almost hear an ancient jeweler, squinting over a lump of unrefined gold, whispering to himself about divine favor and prosperity as he shapes it into something meant to showcase splendor. Rewinding through the ages to the time of hand-woven tunics and markets bustling with loud bartering, gold was more than just pretty metal. Oh, much more. It was token and testament to a civilization's wealth, the symbol of affluence envied by neighboring tribes, all the way to being lauded by priests who declared it a most favored offering to the gods. Wealthy aristocrats would drape themselves in it, either in the form of elaborate accessories or decorative armor, because who says you can't look fabulous and be protected in battle? Gold's role wasn't confined to aesthetics or status. Think of it as the ancient world's multipurpose life hack. It found its way into religious rituals, signifying purity and worthiness. In Egyptian culture, for instance, it was believed that the gods themselves were made of gold, an ethereal substance worthy of celestial bodies. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, gold played a role in sealing treaties and alliances, blending both politics and divinity in its gleaming embrace. Imagine trying to dissolve a partnership forged in shining hues and historic importance. Awkward, right? At this juncture, historians still argue whether gold's almost magical status stemmed from its rarity or its unalterable nature. While you scratch your head in thought, ponder how gold couldn't rust, corrode, or tarnish. This permanence rendered it not merely a physical treasure, but a metaphorical touchstone linked to immortality. And let's not forget its tantalizing malleability, which allowed even the most creatively challenged artisan to shape it into a testament of their genius, or at least their optimism. In the secluded corridors of ancient mythologies, gold was the child of the earth's very soul, a divine resin that seeped into the world through cracks unknown, a touch of the god's handiwork. This age-old allure is akin to how we modern folk might queue breathlessly for the latest tech gadget. Though, admittedly, gold has the edge. It didn't require a software update once every 2 weeks. Enter the quirky tidbit. The Egyptians saw gold as the flesh of their sun god Ra, wrapping it not just around the living, but lovingly placing it on the mummies of the deceased, ensuring they dazzled in the afterlife. Circuitous, isn't it? Here was a substance on earth coveted for its ability to promise celestial passage. If you think about it, gold is like the glittering swipe right across ancient cultures, where any swipe might either doom or endow you with cosmic favor. So, here you find yourself, nestled comfortably in whispers of historical enigma, eyes beginning to droop as you think on this beguilement for gold. Perhaps, after all, myth blends with reality as seamlessly as morning melts into dusk, and in its golden glow, you appreciate the subtle resonances that echo through time. As you find yourself enveloped in the whispers of ancient sands, Let's wander into the heart of Africa, where the legendary lands of Kush and Aksum once flourished. Picture this. You're balancing the fine, velvet touch of Ethiopian soil under your feet, which, if legends are to be believed, could very well be gold-dusted by those industrious ants everyone kept talking about. These lands, the very fabric of ancient Ethiopian kingdoms, thrived like a pot of overpriced organic honey in a gluten-free market, both commanding attention and creating cravings across the ancient world. The kingdom of Kush and the kingdom of Aksum played vital roles in the bustling commerce of Africa. You see, they were kind of like the iPhones of their time. Everyone wanted a piece of them. Though less pocket-sized and without the constantly updating software, they were no less influential. These kingdoms stood as powerful trading empires, commodifying gold like a Netflix binge-worthy series that never seemed to end. Yet, unlike today's streaming services, they shared this wealth of gold through commerce rather than accounts. It's fascinating to know that gold wasn't merely a shiny yellow metal to the ancient Kushites and Aksumites. It was their ticket to the world of prestige and influence. From lush valleys to steep mountains, these lands offered a unique blend of resources that allowed them to rise to prominence. And rise they did, cultivating a cultural and economic landscape akin to the sensation of your favorite cafe, finally crafting a perfect latte, just divine. It wasn't just about bartering gold for luxury, though. It was deeper, tied to a spiritual and divine essence. Historians still argue whether it was the sheer abundance of this abundant metal or its mystical associations that truly propelled these kingdoms onto the global stage. Now, pack your travel satchel and ready your walking stick, because we're trekking into the bustling marketplaces of Aksum. Here, traders haggled over cloves, frankincense, and yes, glittering gold, creating a vibrant tapestry of noise and color. Imagine the chaos, akin to the morning rush at your nearest coffee shop, but with less caffeine and more negotiation over the weight of shiny stones. The influence of these marketplace negotiations was profound, driving connections with not only neighboring lands, but reaching as far as the Roman Empire and India, a real ancient Silk Road trip without the GPS misdirections. In Aksum, gold was more than currency. It was a symbol of cultural might, a bit like how a single tweet can transform a random individual into an internet sensation overnight. To the citizens here, gold transcended the material, often manifesting in religious and ceremonial facets of life. Picture priests, draped in gold-laden garments, chanting divine verses with the entire community believing that the brilliance of gold connected them with the divine. It's enough to make you ponder on whether those shimmering artifacts found nowadays were once imbued with spiritual energy or possibly ancient bling. Wouldn't they make a splash on your timeline? The rich tapestry of trade didn't just solidify these kingdoms' financial power. The location was prime real estate for ancient trade routes, a bustling hub akin to the Grand Central Station of history, where ideas and cultures mingled with as much zeal as your latest reality show binge. The land was opportune for this thriving exchange, bordered by the Red Sea to the east with endless caravan routes reaching outwards like the curious fingers of a child eager to explore. This kingdom's geographical advantage was the envy of other civilizations, proving once again, it's all about location, location, location. While alternate currencies, like barley and spices, were traded, gold served as the regal cherry on top. Yet one can't help but wonder, was gold truly the sole glittering force behind the opulence of these kingdoms? Some scholars debate this, suggesting the prominence of Aksum and Kush was just as much about skilled diplomacy and social structure, kind of how you need those supporting actors to make a movie theatrical gold. As the intrigue of the grandiose palaces begins to wane, shift your gaze skyward to the towering obelisks, the ancient skyscrapers of Aksum, intricately carved with mythological engravings and undoubtedly another symbol of their powerful stature. There's something transcendent in knowing that these obelisks have stood the test of time, possibly witnessing more existential crises than your local toaster oven repairman. How they reached such heights and what they truly signified, well, historians are still piecing those stories together between debates on structural engineering and just a dash of ancient conspiracy theories. So here you stand, within the shadow of these giants, wondering if perhaps the secrets of their foundations hold clues to the past endeavors of kingdoms whose legacies stretch far beyond their borders. The indelible mark of trade, power, and mystery still captures the imagination of historians and dreamers alike. Talking of dreamers, remember our good friend Herodotus? The guy who path-blazed sensational stories like some ancient influencer? Well, it was the trade hubs of Aksum and Kush that gave birth to tales which tickled the feathers of history themselves, transporting myths and realities across Europe and Asia. As you weave through the echoes of ancient commerce, perhaps you'll catch the alluring hum of legacy sweetly singing in the breeze. A legacy marked by golden treasures and mythical ants, of kingdoms whose names still glitter in the annals of glory and historical chaos. At the crossroads of commerce and culture, the lands of Kush and Aksum tell tales as ancient as time itself, each a golden thread in the vast tapestry of human history. A bedtime story of sorts, a soothing lullaby that wraps around, like a gentle retrospect gently easing you to sleep. You find yourself standing on the hot sands of an ancient Ethiopian landscape, letting grains slip through your fingers as you muse about an extraordinary legend, a tale as grand and curious as the Great Pyramids themselves. This is the story of the mythical gold-digging ants, a narrative so astounding that it once befuddled historians and scholars, almost like when we first learned that tomatoes are actually fruits but still treat them as vegetables. Yes, you see, perceptions can shift, and so can myths. The origins of this myth are as rich as the gold they speak of. Imagine this. Somewhere beneath the earth, in uncharted terrains, colossal ants busy themselves clambering through hidden tunnels, excavating gold nuggets as nonchalantly as if they were just another Sunday chore. To the ancient Ethiopians, this wasn't just a fantastical tale but an explanation as to how the precious metal made its way to the surface. Sounds wild, doesn't it? Picture those ants wearing helmets and mining boots. It's almost plausible enough to warrant a children's book. Though we're having a light-hearted chuckle, the myth's resonance reverberated through the ancient world. It was Herodotus, the Greek historian and traveler, who perhaps was one of the earliest travel bloggers, delighting his audiences with stories of lands far away and full of wonder. In his chronicles, he relayed that tribes living at the perimeter of India were the source of this tale, astonishingly unaware that it would traverse borders to become an Ethiopian staple. Imagine a game of ancient telephone, where someone said gold dunes, and another heard golden ants. Here's a mainstream historical tidbit for some solid grounding. The gold trade was indeed a significant part of Ethiopian commerce, particularly under the mighty kingdoms of Kush and Aksum. So, the allure of gold would naturally entwine itself with myths and legends. Now, for a quirky nugget, a scholarly debate continues even today about the possible misinterpretation of marmots, known for hoarding treasure-like trinkets, as these infamous gold-digging ants. It's one of those, did you mean? Moments where you're left wondering if the ancient world simply misheard their way into a legend. Picture it now, a conference room with historians arguing over the apparent confusion between huge ants and burrowing marmots. Perhaps accompanied by an ancient world equivalent of awkward PowerPoint presentations with slides titled, "How much ant is too much ant?" Not to sound cheeky, but wouldn't that make one riveting seminar? Yet, reality and myth have always danced together, teasing our willingness to believe the unbelievable while grounding some otherworldly tales in a flicker of truth. Just think back to when people were convinced the earth was flat, a mindset still echoing in certain circles today, probably around a spherical conference table. And here, within the Ethiopian myth, you have a glimpse into how people of yore came to terms with the wonders surrounding them. Historians still argue whether there was a kernel of truth to these golden ants, actual creatures carrying gold-specked earth to the surface, or if they were simply an imaginative metaphor for the unexplained marvels of nature. It's a dance between earnest belief and the colorful strokes of an artist's brush. Perhaps in the absence of ants, burrowing rodents, or simple geological phenomena might suffice as less fantastical explanations. But where's the fun in that? As you let your mind wander through the Ethiopian sands, picture traders relaying these ant-filled tales at bustling markets, their wide-eyed listeners enthralled. Much like how we sit through endless YouTube playlists today of people whispering fun facts to put us to sleep. Even now, the story continues to capture hearts, a golden thread woven into the tapestry of storytelling. So as dusk settles on our mythical journey, you might find yourself drifting too, into dreams where giant ants carry their golden cargo beneath a starry Ethiopian sky. As you nestle into your space of comfort and prepare to be gently lulled by tales of yore, imagine meeting a man over 2 millennia old, a man whose quill captured the colors and caprices of bygone worlds in magical detail. Yes, none other than Herodotus, a Greek historian who seemed to have one foot persistently planted in the shoes of a bewitched traveler and the other in the annals of extravagant storytelling. His tales, like a bowl of mixed nuts, have all the elements, a sprinkle of truth, a hint of exaggeration, and more than a few nuts, both literal and metaphorical. It's his wonder-filled descriptions of Ethiopia, the so-called land burnt black by the sun, that delivered to Greece not only visions of vast abundances but of those eccentric, gold-digging ants that make Camel cigarettes seem understated. Herodotus, often referred to as the father of history, was perhaps also the father of those offbeat anecdotes that make history teachers roll their eyes and mutter under-breath comments when he's cited in a term paper. Now, historians agree that he was a pioneer in intellectually curious chronicling, detailing the culture and geography of places he never actually laid eyes on. Yet, whether these stories were second-hand revelations or a touch of fabled romancing concocted over a goblet of ancient Merlot, remains for historians to awkwardly debate at academic conferences. Was he merely captivated by tales of ants the size of foxes with a nose for gold, or was it his penchant for giving his audience a good tale to chew on during long alfresco symposia? Picture yourself as an ancient Greek, lounging at such a symposium with a slightly stale grape in hand, as Herodotus regales you with tales of Ethiopia's exotic landscapes and even more exotic anthropods. His story about these so-called Indian ants, who might have run a profitable side hustle in gold mining, likely filled the night air with skeptical laughter and imaginative wonder. The Greek term he used, myrmeses, does translate to ants, but scholars still argue whether Herodotus was referring to an actual ant or possibly a misinterpretation of local animals, like the cunning marmots or some overgrown prairie dogs with a bling obsession. Honestly, gold-detecting marmots? Sounds like a Saturday morning cartoon waiting to happen. Entangled in Herodotus's narratives, those Greeks of antiquity probably let their imaginations frolic freely across Ethiopian deserts, a rare vacation from the philosophical quandaries of Socrates or self-imposed fasting due to Plato's dialogues. Herodotus offered them a mental postcard from another world, scented with fresh, mythical allure. For Herodotus, straddling the line between fact and fascination wouldn't have seemed like an ethical tightrope to tread. It was the time when storytelling wasn't just a job, who knew it could be such a profitable gig, but a noble art form. Trying to pick apart his works to extract nuggets of factual gold from this man's mythological gold mines is akin to separating your laundry by color, never a dull task, really, but thoroughly rewarding if you aim to avoid clothing the shade of toddler art projects. Consider that in an era when Google Earth was about 2,400 years from invention, foreign lands like Ethiopia consistently bore the weight of legend and lore. Over-listening readers in far-flung taverns and marketplaces dotting the ancient world were delighted by the unique tales of spice and treasure, inspired by Herodotus's accounts. Some folks probably wondered if these ants also served honey or were more generous with the gold if one left a modest yet tasty trail of cookie crumbs. Oh, to imagine the possibilities. Remembering dear Herodotus is like journeying through a living collage where facts drip from mythological frames to paint a broader, more enriched image of curiosity and human contemplation. It reminds us that history, like a classic sitcom, repeats its themes, a blend of rigid structures and inviting storylines. Whether distilling tales of giant insects with a knack for precious metal discoveries or teasing whole societies with snippets of vague reality, Herodotus revved up ancient engines of wonder, a fuel still igniting passions for historians today, setting them off to sift through both his claims and climbs with hopeful enthusiasm. As you wade further into this hypnotic evening of soft voices and distant epics, consider the power of stories, those earnest declarations and fanciful fables that ride across time on whispered trails of myth. Surely, it gives one pause. So, as you consider now the quiet grandeur of whispering trees outside your window, or the drip of a lone faucet in the sleepy stillness of a house unwinding at end of day, allow your mind the amusement and delight of going back, way back. To listen like the ancients did, transforming each tale you fabricate and every legend you unwittingly birth into a magnificent new canvas for the soul. After all, when you think about it, isn't pondering oversized, gold-hoarding insects half the point of storytelling alchemy? Sweet dreams of golden ants, my friend. You wander through the hazy corridors of time, where reality and myth interlace with the skill of an artisan crafting a delicate tapestry. Picture the ancient world, a place where a sailor's tale heard over a crackling fire could become eventual reality, thanks to a touch of embellishment and a lack of Google Earth. Ancient travelers, perhaps relying on little more than their charisma and their tales full of larger-than-life creatures and landscapes, narrated stories as vivid as a painter's brightest palette. Their accounts, often furnished with fragments of truth garnished with liberal doses of fantasy, wove robust fibers into the fabric of human understanding. You can almost hear the travelers' tales being spun, their voices carrying over campfires and moonlit gatherings. Imagine sitting among them, the night air cool against your skin as you listen. The stars above twinkle conspiratorially, for they too have witnessed the unfolding of these stories. There is something mesmerizing about a good story, and these were nothing short of enthralling. One such tale caught on like wildfire, spreading its tendrils throughout the ancient world, and it involved, of all things, ants. But not just any ants, mind you. These were legendary gold-digging ants, supposedly as large as foxes, rummaging through the earth in that far-off land called Ethiopia. Now, wouldn't you love to have overheard the meeting where this idea was concocted? If you think about it, the ancient world was like one big neighborhood watch meeting, only instead of discussing tree removals or the latest raccoon sightings, they debated whether ants were really fossicking for gold beneath the Ethiopian soils. Historians are still scratching their heads, gently, so as not to ruin their carefully groomed beards, about how exactly these stories were perceived. Some argue that the descriptions were a result of linguistic confusion, supposedly mixing the term for ant with something entirely different. Others suggest they were partly inspired by large burrowing marmots known to inhabitants of certain Asiatic regions, but whose actual antics never involved gold. Whatever the case, these tales blurred lines between geography and fantasy to the point that some took them as factual accounts. The ancient maps of Ethiopia, drawn with an imaginative flair akin to a modern art show, included these mythical elements not to deceive, but to illustrate the wonder of unexplored lands. Picture a map not as GPS precision, but as a poetic narrative of exploration and imagination. You might recall your great-aunt Edith's enthusiasm in suggesting that the creases in her homemade apple pie crust indicated secret, ancient routes. You see, it's all in who you're willing to believe. Our friend Herodotus, whom you may remember from his adventures in ornate storytelling, championed this blurred distinction between actual places and those of fantastic lore. As you lazily sip on your chamomile tea, you might casually contemplate whether he was genuinely convinced of the existence of these mining ants or merely indulging a delightful story for the sake of his audience. Either way, the blending of geography and imagined landscapes created a mosaic of myth that endured for generations, almost as everlasting as the pyramids, or at least longer than the latest TikTok trend dance. These ancient travelers didn't have the luxury of TripAdvisor to critique the venues and verify the existence of the gold-digging ants. Instead, the allure of these stories lay not merely in their believability but in their capacity to stir the imaginations of those sitting spellbound by a fire's glow, wondering how much truth hid within these mystical narratives. As you continue your exploration through the various landscapes of Ethiopia, a sort of ancient GPS recalculated towards myth, you find that the tales were more about the art of storytelling than hard evidence. Picture a caravan loaded not only with silks and spices but with tales that waft through the air like the scent of warming incense. Though travelers may not actually have seen the golden ants themselves, their word was spun in such a vivid tapestry that the lines between the actual and the fantastical became delightfully silky and hard to disentangle. So adept were these storytellers that, to this day, people scratch their heads or polish their glasses, attempting to separate the grains of historical truth from the dazzling myths. And amidst all the jumbled colors and sketches on these historical canvases is the relentless influence of the human penchant for embellishment. Who can resist the dramatic flair of a story that has been spruced up just a touch, like how one might add a dash of cayenne to an otherwise mild stew? Oftentimes, it was tales such as these that ultimately intrigued, confused, and fascinated neighboring cultures. These vivid accounts traveled far and wide, much like the seafarers themselves, carried on the gentle breezes of curiosity and the unending waves of human imagination, a vessel that we, even today, sail upon with eager anticipation and a slight sense of skepticism. So, there you have it. As the mist of ancient stories parts, and you return to your cozy reality, perhaps you glance at the ants marching diligently along your kitchen counter. Suddenly, they seem to carry more than crumbs. They parade with an air of ancient mystery and enigma, albeit without any actual specks of gold in sight, unless almond flour happens to be the new gold standard, of course. Revel in the magic of these renowned ants that, while perhaps lost to the skepticism of modern auras, still hold the solid ground in the imaginative realms of storytelling. After all, you must admit that when it comes to tales of mythical ants mining gold beneath ancient soils, it's not necessarily the truth of the matter that counts, but the vitality and vibrancy of a story that refuses to fade away. Picture yourself setting foot in Ethiopia, where the horizon stretches into a seemingly endless canvas of mesmerizing landscapes. As you begin your trek through this varied terrain, you discover that it's much more than a picturesque view. Each step you take immerses you deeper into ancient whispers and echoes of legends. You trudge along well-worn paths that carried traders and dreamers alike, all of them united by the intoxicating allure of hidden treasure beneath the soil. One moment you find yourself winding through the lush, green highlands where mist clings to the mountains like an age-old secret. The air is crisp and fresh, your breath taken away not just by the altitude, but by the sheer majesty of your surroundings. The locals, carrying on with their day, smile knowingly. You suspect they have shared these tales of legendary gold since time immemorial. Here, historians still argue whether the landscape itself gave rise to such tales. Was it the abundance of natural resources, including gold, or perhaps the unique topography and climate that inspired stories of ants mining gold from the earth? It's all quite a riddle wrapped in a mystery with just a sprinkle of espionage, an ancient Marvel movie waiting to be realized. But press onward, for Ethiopia's tale is not told only in verdant greens. You make your way to the sun-baked lowlands, where the heat shimmers off the arid plains, and the awe-inspiring mountains give way to desolate, yet charming stretches of ochre desert. Why, you ask, are there so many variations in these terrains? Well, that's the beauty of Ethiopia. It's the architectural equivalent of a buffet spread, offering a little of everything to pique the adventurous palate. Quirky fact, some of these lands were once thought to breathe gold dust, a theory only Goldilocks would marvel at. You might wonder, as you tread these storied paths, how these landscapes once guided ancient caravanners laden with precious metals, or were walked by storytellers who wove tales of ants larger than life. It is as though each rock and hill has a memory to share. The landscape around you, once encompassing empires, became the setting for epic myths and pivotal dramas. As you continue to roam these lands, tapping the imaginative bedrock of Ethiopia's history, you stumble across the semi-mythical rivers that snake through the expanse. These waters, though scarce now, were once teeming life veins for trade and exchange. Merchants, curious souls, and perhaps the occasional con artist traveled these routes to find new riches, like gold, and to share legends about the earth's bounties. In your journey, you come across the rugged Simeon Mountains, standing proudly with jagged peaks piercing the cobalt sky. These geological wonders, formed millions of years ago, bear witness to the legends they cradle. Geologists might debate fervently about the exact age of these mountains, much like two eternally squabbling siblings, but nearly everyone agrees they harbor stories as complex as their rocky ridges. As legend had it, the giant ants brought gold from the earth. However fanciful this notion, it threaded a narrative rich with allegory and meaning. Scholars still ponder over whether these stories originated from misunderstood observations of native animals, or perhaps the tale was a shrewd metaphor for the unparalleled labor and tenacity required to extract gold from the resistant earth, a monument to human industry. With each new vista unveiled, you ponder if it feels like Ethiopia itself is alive with a treasure chest of geological history, almost too generous with its secrets. One might even say it's the world's worst poker player, unable to keep a straight face while hiding its golden aces. Now there's a thought. Ethiopia, the undisputed champion of geological poker night. But, alas, we digress. Continuing your trailblazing adventure, you find yourself enraptured by the tantalizing prospect of myth interwoven with tangible reality. You pass through landscapes as diverse as the stairways of a grand cathedral, where each step brings you closer to understanding. The geography here holds mysteries both ancient and timeless, sculpted over millennia into a land that reverberates with its own tale. Each location, it seems, beckons with whispers of riches below. The same way explorers of old navigated these terrains armed with stories and speculations about gold, you might just navigate with some camel skin water bottles and GPS, waiting for that gold nearby notification to ping. Before you return from your imagined trek, let the landscapes linger in your memory, like a whisper on a cool breeze. They shelter stories and echoes that transcend time, a testament, perhaps, to the ant-sized kernels of truth buried within the mountainous myths and the enduring power these tales hold over our imagination. And so, as the sun begins to dip below the Ethiopian horizon, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson. You relish the medley of tales etched into every grain of sand, every river curve, and mountain peak. It's a place where gold and stories intertwine, whispering a timeless truth that entices the heart, stirs the soul, and leaves you dreaming of a land abundant not just in treasures, but in soul-stirring stories. Imagine yourself trudging along the sun-baked paths of ancient Ethiopia, a land vibrant with myths and bustling with stories as rich as the gold lying beneath its soil. You're not the first to explore these routes. Countless traders before you carried not just exotic goods, but also tales that captivated imaginations far and wide. These ancient trade routes crisscrossed the region, woven through the fabric of life, not unlike the braided hair of the people you might encounter along the way. Close your eyes, and perhaps you can almost hear the distant echoes of market chatter intermingling with the clattering hooves of camels. A caravan threading its way through a land where boundaries between myth and reality, the real and fanciful, were often as indistinct as the horizon at dusk. Merchants and travelers from near and far met along these routes, carrying not only spices, precious stones, and minerals like gold, but also stories, each tale embroidered slightly by its teller's own imagination. One mainstream historical fact about these trade routes remains how they served as lifelines in this region, connecting it to the broader world. These routes linked Ethiopia to Egypt and other parts of North Africa, then further on to the Middle East and India. Imagine camels laden with gold, incense, and ivory, their backs swaying rhythmically with the slow plod of travel, much like a gentle lullaby coaxing you to sleep. An unusual tidbit to tickle your curiosity as your mind meanders along these dusty paths is the legend of peppered tales about Ethiopian navigators who allegedly possessed a mysterious knowledge of the Ethiopian highlands. They made maps from giraffe skins and jabbered tales of monstrous creatures lurking in the shadows. While we may laugh at the idea of giraffe skin maps, the rich storytelling of these traders was no less important than their physical wares. Historians still argue whether these tales were more inspired by encounters with local fauna or an attempt to outdo each other in the embellishment of adventure, much like a modern fisherman telling of the one that got away. The notion that trade routes facilitated a kind of cultural barter is fascinating. Stories morphed, mutated, and crossed as easily as the borders themselves, growing like the ancient baobabs you might spot along the journey. As your thoughts meander with these tales, consider the broader cultural exchange at work. Just as spices and fabrics transform the tastes and styles of distant lands, these stories shaped perceptions and inspired myths. They were the ancient world's version of blockbuster films or viral TikTok dances, shared eagerly and adapted creatively by those who encountered them. As you explore this imaginary landscape, you come across bustling marketplaces where vendors call out in multiple languages. Here, gossip is traded as voraciously as goods. What marvels came from over the distant mountains? What cryptid might slink from the shadows tonight? People here are as curious as sparrows might be, inspecting a crumb. In this atmosphere, it's easy to see how tales of giant gold-carrying ants could emerge, capturing the imaginations of both the skeptical and the credulous. And speaking of credulity, imagine trying to vet your sources back then. Sir, is there a fact-checker in the building? But back to our story. These ancient trade routes, unassuming in today's terms, were once the veins of knowledge and mystery that circulated stories to and from Ethiopia. So much was shared, wonders and riches, dreams and nightmares. Each tale told was a brick in the sprawling corridor of myth, a passageway through which you can stroll even in this most tranquil of narratives. As you drift deeper into this exploration of history, feeling perhaps as tired as an Ethiopian donkey after a long day's journey, but surely more entertained, you realize the incredible role these routes played. In recent years, scholars have unearthed remnants of ancient artifacts, each whispering secrets about how far-reaching this network of narratives truly was. Perhaps you fancy yourself a bit of a treasure hunter, ears pricked for stories more than gold. These trade routes didn't just carry physical wealth, they were the thoroughfares of lore and language, threading vibrant tapestries across continents where myths thrived like luxuriant vines. Sometimes these stories were exaggerated to the point that even Herodotus might have shrugged and rolled his eyes, if such an expression were befitting a man of his historical stature. And so, as you tiptoe through the grainy footprints of traders past, you find yourself on the crest of a hill watching the sun sink below the horizon, much like the countless storytellers before whose verbs and adjectives have woven a vibrant tapestry across time. With a gentle smile, realize that in some small, sleepy way, you're part of this chronicle now too, your imagination having once traversed the ant-lined paths of an ancient world. Ast, brave dreamer, and sweet dreams until next we wander these storied paths. As you traverse the twisting lanes of history, you encounter a curious tale set in the land of ancient Ethiopia, where industrious ants unearth gold from the bowels of the earth. Now, why ants, you might wonder? After all, wouldn't it make more sense if it was fairies performed the gold digging, with their delicate wings and mystical dust? Yet, the ant, though tiny, is a symbol of persistence and labor, qualities deeply respected across cultures over millennia. Imagine, if you will, a community of industrious insects working tirelessly. In ancient Ethiopian culture, as it turns out, these busy creatures weren't just known for spoiling picnics or creating meticulous underground labyrinths. They were seen as enigmatic builders and relentless workers. You almost picture a line of ants sporting tiny miners' helmets, each hefting a nugget of gold over their minuscule shoulders. It's a tiny bit ludicrous, yet endearingly rich in mystery and metaphor. Ants have always held a peculiar place in humanity's collective psyche. They symbolize industriousness and unity through their ability to organize and accomplish tasks far beyond their singular physical capacities. In Ethiopia, these qualities were magnified, blending seamlessly into local lore. Cultural tales spoke of ants venturing deep into the earth to unearth golden treasures, a myth that resonated strongly amidst the rugged and varied terrains of the region. But why exactly the obsession with these mini-miners? Historians still argue whether the gold-digging ant was born purely of imagination or if there was a basis in reality. One theory speculates these tales may have originated from desert regions where small burrowing animals, mistaken for ants, would unwittingly bring gold particles to the surface while creating their nests. If you squint at human folly, it's easy to see how word of mouth could stretch a rodent reality into an ant fable. Today, ants are recognized for their unrivaled cooperation and systematic approach. Imagine translating this industriousness into ancient folklore, where every twist told under the Ethiopian night sky would leave listeners peering curiously at anthills with newfound respect, and perhaps suspicion that their next picnic might cost them more than just a sandwich. Interestingly enough, Ethiopia wasn't alone in employing ants symbolically. They appear in varied myths worldwide. In Hindu mythology, for instance, a dogmatic ant's diligence is seen as an unwavering step towards spiritual purity. Pause here and appreciate how irony unfolds. An ant, a creature so tiny it can't even hope to leave footprints, yet its symbolic presence steps boldly across cultural narratives. Across the ocean in Native American lore, ants are symbols of hard work and community cooperation. Now, amidst all these insect-imbued tales, imagine the conversation pieces ancient travelers must have shared along trade routes. Over a campfire, one's mind would wander, you muse, considering ants as agents of divine benevolence or, perhaps, merely nature's merry jesters. Such stories fashioned an unbroken thread across human experience, linking economies, symbolism, and utterly fantastic myths. Gold trading routes were highways for dreams and misconceptions alike, bustling bazaars where tales of gem-studded ants set imaginations aflame. Naturally, you might ask if any scholar definitively cracked the code of these ant stories. Well, not quite. Just as the ants in question scuttled away into obscurity, so too did the scholarly consensus. While some academics championed the theory of misunderstood desert animals inadvertently setting gold myths aflame, others believe these tales simply highlight human penchant for weaving rich stories from otherwise pedestrian truths. As you relax into the hushed rhythm of storytelling, it's easy to let these whimsical narratives hypnotize your thoughts. You'd reassure yourself that perhaps the truth isn't crucial here. Instead, it's the poetic imagery, the weaving of truths and tales, that matters. Besides, even without concrete answers, ants' symbolic presence in these stories sings of human creativity and idiosyncratic musings over time. The legacy of ants as tiny toil masters extends beyond simple myth. In modern times, scientific scrutiny celebrates their communal structure, giving rise to metaphors in unexpected fields. From business models analyzed through the lens of ant colonies to complex robotic movements mimicking their group dynamic, it seems we never quite shed our fascination with these minuscule marvels. Relieved that no one has proposed an ant-run government. Yet, you experience a quiet satisfaction in their persistent symbolic omnipresence. And so, as you meander through the mythological tapestry of Ethiopia, you let the subtle power of the ant, tiny yet mighty, instill a message of industriousness and wonder. These golden ants become a testament to human curiosity and whimsy, casting a long shadow across a world thriving on the rich lore of possibility and improbable truths. Thus, even when the sands of time cover the finer details of why these stories were born, their fantastical heart continues beating, a curious hum beneath the tales we carry forward, and marching on through the corridors of our collective imagination. When your eyelids droop and your thoughts dance softly toward dreams, consider the golden-threaded legends that still whisper along ancient Ethiopian winds. Dream of industrious ants, of golden treasures unseen, and let the world of quiet toil lull you into slumber. After all, the ant's tale is one of persistence, a reminder that even the smallest among us can create stories that echo through the ages. Gold, it's not just a shiny metal but a cornerstone of how societies perceive wealth, power, and influence. In Ethiopia, this precious metal was not only a symbol of affluence but also intertwined deeply with its society, wrapping itself around the spiritual, political, and economic fabric of the time with the same dexterity that you might expect in a modern-day multitasker juggling caffeine, deadlines, and unending email chains. When observing Ethiopian history, you'll find that gold's glow goes beyond mere decoration. It becomes a guiding star in the cultural cosmos. Let's begin our journey by weaving through the rituals that were gilded by gold, rituals that resonated from mountaintop altars down to humble village thresholds. Imagine watching priests who used gold objects in their divine ceremonies, twinkling under the sun's inquisitive rays like nature's own disco ball. Gold wasn't merely an offering to the heavens, it was shaped into symbols of divine favor, acting as a conduit between the corporeal and the celestial. It whispered to the gods, and perhaps even shouted a little, demanding prosperity, health, and abundant rains to nurture the fertile Ethiopian soil. But gold also had secular duties in the realm of politics. Remember those intricate alliances your favorite TV show characters always seem to be crafting over cups of poison and sharp jesting? Well, ancient Ethiopian alliances, although presumably less dramatic, relied heavily on gold's gleam. Diplomatic gifts forged from gold were exchanged as a token of good faith, setting the stage for cooperative ventures that could shape the fate of entire kingdoms. You can almost hear gold clinking softly in its casket as emissaries made their way to foreign lands, their presence a diplomatic missive writ in metal. Historians still argue whether these gifts were given as a genuine earnest or were laced with ulterior motives, as murky as an old coffee pot at the end of a long Monday. Was gold merely a luxurious thank you card? Or was it a bribe, a clever pawn moved in a larger game of geopolitical chess? These speculative whispers might have echoed then as they do now, changing tone with shifting political winds. As if gold hadn't already woven itself tightly enough into the societal quilt, think of its economic implications, yes, like taxes but with more shine and less paperwork. Gold stood as the backbone of commerce in Ethiopia, with influence stretching as far as the trade routes meandering through Africa and crossing into Arabian and Asian lands. Those prosperous trade networks helped export not just gold but stories, like our mythical gold-digging ant's tale, to distant lands, carrying with them hints of Ethiopian culture across the windswept dunes and stormy seas. Let's not forget that beyond all this machination and influence talk, there's always room for a touch of quirk. Some historians speculate, hand on chin, if those gold-rich lands somehow influenced the aromatic coffee rituals that centuries later would lay claim to the same region. But perhaps it's merely a fanciful notion, the type that blossoms at midnight over too much caffeine when both gold and espresso share dreams of world domination. Capping off this exploration, imagine, for a moment, a cluster of artifacts much like the suspiciously unopened gym membership invitations, forgotten, yet ever formidable. Each piece was a testament to gold's influence, telling stories inscribed not with ink but with careful craftsmanship of the hands and souls who dared to mold nature's bounty into human history. In the end, the journey of gold through Ethiopian society is an intricate dance of divinity, diplomacy, commerce, and perhaps even a splash of humor. It's a journey that encourages us to ponder, was gold wielded by Ethiopia, or did Ethiopia yield to gold's irresistible allure? Just like the perfect coffee blend, finding the answer might require a well-balanced mix of thought, curiosity, and maybe just a bit of playful speculation. So, as you wrap yourself in the golden warmth of this tale, perhaps imagine discovering answers in dreams where ants hold secret maps to treasures, inviting you to wander beyond the ordinary, much like the legends themselves. As you continue this dreamlike journey through ancient Ethiopia, the imagery of ants returns, imbued with meaning well beyond their tiny size. Picture, if you will, these diligent creatures scuttling about, each carrying a piece of the earth's resin, or at least that's how myths painted their industrious acts. In Ethiopian mythology, the ant becomes a symbol, a metaphor, really, for more than just gold. It transcends its tiny realm, representing power, persistence, and an unwavering march towards prosperity. Now, as you sip your imaginary Ethiopian tej, a honey wine that tends to leave a sweet, lingering dreaminess, let's consider the important role ants play in cultures across time and geography. While you might argue over whether any creature in the animal kingdom truly represents persistence, the ant certainly presents a strong case, working tirelessly, marching in unison towards a collective goal. And this isn't just idle anthropomorphism. Ants were admired for their teamwork and ceaseless drive, qualities that surely inspired ancient storytellers. Historians still argue whether the ant was chosen by Ethiopian mythweavers for its symbolism before or after the tales of gold digging circulated. Was it the ant's industrious nature that drew parallels to the laborious extraction of precious metals from the earth? Or did the fortuitous fable of gold-digging ants simply latch onto established cultural metaphors? Either way, you can almost feel the webs of narrative intertwining, like vines growing around an ancient monument, strong yet yielding. As you explore these possibilities, you're gently reminded of Herodotus and his wide-eyed enthusiasm for cataloging the wonders of the known world. He captured these Ethiopian tales, whether myth or reality, and presented them to the Greek world like one might showcase the latest trend in philosophical thought, or perhaps the ancient equivalent of an unboxing video. Here, the ant ceases merely to be a fun factoid about natural history and becomes a vessel carrying layers of meaning and identity across epochs. Dive deeper into the metaphoric significance of ants, and you might notice how their quiet yet relentless endeavors mirror the pursuit of power. Each ant marches as part of a grand design, unknown to them, yet crucial to the thriving of their colony. Much like the Ethiopians of yore who toiled under the sun, believed in myths, and traded gold, each individual ostensibly part of a larger, gold-gilded narrative of prosperity and advancement. The symbolism of the ant in Ethiopian lore taps into universal themes, ones that resonate just as powerfully at your kitchen table as they do amidst ancient legends. Persistence in the face of adversity, power in unity, and prosperity as a result of both. These are not merely stories of gold and insects, but reflections of human aspiration. And let's not forget a tiny dollop of humor, because surely our ancient ancestors chuckled at the thought of tiny ants as the world's wealth bringers. It's like hiring squirrels to manage your financial portfolio, an amusing thought until their acorns yield dividends. Interestingly, a quirky little tidbit is how ants have frequently emerged as symbols of industriousness not just in Ethiopia but globally. From Aesop's fables to motivational quotables and modern self-help books, they're the unassuming mascots of diligence. One scholar might propose that ants became a cross-cultural phenomenon purely because they are everywhere, small enough to go unnoticed yet possessing the potential to inspire grand tales if looked at askew. The longevity and universality of this symbol beg the question: do we choose our metaphors, or do they choose us? Perhaps nestled beneath layers of silt and time and myths are echoes of rattling ant colonies, each exerting influence long past its time. And so, the Ethiopian ant with a penchant for gold becomes not just a curious mythological character, but a metaphor immortalized across generations. As with many aspects of storytelling, mistaking metaphor for reality often blurs lines, much like that time you thought fool's gold was an invitation to an epic adventure. This allegory leads us back to the essence of Ethiopian fables, where metaphor mingles with reality, each supporting and scaffolding the other until, like a fine honey wine, they produce an intoxicating narrative brew. So, as we wrap this golden thread around our metaphorical fingers, reflecting on ants as powerhouses of symbolic cachet, consider the persistence etched in their march and in the continuity of human curiosity about them. Whether or not their tiny feet ever struck gold beneath ancient soils, and trust me, there's no evidence that ants began any underground stock exchanges. Their role in Ethiopian mythology serves as an eternal dance of enterprise and endeavor threaded through time. If ever you dream again of Ethiopia, caught in a twilight reverie where myths walk hand in hand with reality, you might just find an ant tiptoeing across your consciousness, carrying not grains of sand, but whispers of power, persistence, and prosperity. As you drift further into this reflection, the world of ancient myths gently closes its golden pages, not with a snap, but with the soft, rustling promise of stories yet to be dreamed. You're standing at the precipice of another ancient mystery, teetering on the edge of whimsy and history, right where people love to get things hilariously wrong. The story of Ethiopian gold being delivered by giant ants, a tale so curious and puzzling, we've been telling it variations for centuries. It takes a certain kind of misunderstanding to imagine industrious creatures harvesting precious metals, don't you think? Transport yourself to a time when stories got around more than a rumor at a high school lunch table, evolving with every whisper between spice traders and weary travelers. You see, a misunderstanding can be like your grandma's recipe, add a dash of exaggeration, a sprinkle of foreign motifs, and voila, a myth is born. And boy, did the myths about Ethiopian treasure get seasoned, with explorers spreading tales tastier than any traveler's tales or social media influencers post. It's like that internet rumor about NASA claiming funnier things than gold-digging ants. But I digress. You want what's beneath this storytelling surface, much like those supposedly giant ants. As historians sift through these tales reminiscent of a Confucian souffle, let's not dismiss that there might have been some kernel of truth hidden amidst the hyperbole egg whites. Perhaps the region's landscape, rich in geological marvels, painted its own canvas of wonder that beguiled those early chroniclers. Walls of mineral wealth running unnoticed through rough terrain must have seemed like an enchanted rumor that solidified into gold laced with myth. Sure, we're chuckling now, but imagine back then, far removed from Google Maps and geological surveys, trying to explain those shimmering veins in the rocky cradle of Ethiopia. So, the tale morphs into ants the size of terriers lugging nuggets from some subterranean bazaar. It's as if reality decided to take a coffee break, sparking imaginations instead. And let's not spare a thought for how awkward the ants' unions must have been, insisting on better working conditions and leaf sizes akin to yachts. Back to human interaction with these stories, our fascinating fallacy fritters into the fabric but also reminds us that misunderstandings are shockingly persistent. Like people mistaking gullible for a word removed from the dictionary, a delightful chestnut that runs circles around logic. The Ethiopian gold myths have remarkable staying power, fueled by each exploration where gold emerged, carrying with it whispers of invisible ants that history books struggled much like a toddler with a peanut butter jar to contain. Historians still argue whether this was a case of a carefree parable taking legs, quite literally, or if it was misreported storytelling, run amok like birthday candles refusing to extinguish. What was likely told with a twinkle in the eye became gospel truth, a misunderstood treasure polished over generations. Was it trading embellishments or a genuine miscalculation by traders unfamiliar with the terrain's mysteries? Fringe theories suggest ancient tales assigned animal traits to geological phenomena, a conceptual art project where mining becomes an ant farm on steroids. The mishmash of their belief in living landscapes, a common theme across old myths, nudges us to reassess the narrative's origins. And, perchance, wasn't it the grandeur of these tales that informed present cultural resources, ingraining them into Ethiopia's heritage as robustly as any gold vein rooted in Earth's rug? You're probably musing by now that if gold-digging ants reflect our storytelling appetites for grandeur, returning us to campfires and shadow stories, how far have we moved? Present-day discussions and scholarly eyebrows raise higher than unicycle-riding ants when debating such topics. Mystical tales like these framed ancient people's understanding, simultaneously amusing and befuddling modern scholars who mimic literary Sherlock Holmes, piecing stories together from travelers' tear-stained anecdotes. Pause here. Feel the moment where mythology marries misunderstanding, forms a union of golden tales that shimmer with the same allure as the unmined nuggets of Ethiopian mountainsides. As you listen and imagine, a part of you steps into those ancient storytellers' shoes, knowing that every tale's primary ingredient might just include 2 parts mystery mixed with 1 part truth-stretching. In this narrative cauldron, golden myths been stirring through centuries, a testament to humanity's love affair with a good story, all those nuggets never pulled up by ants, but our imaginations nonetheless. Remember how these tales ricocheted across empires, like silk threads weaving connections around campfires. Such ancient fables didn't just grace Ethiopia, they traversed borders, echoing in lands afar, a bit like celebrity gossip going viral centuries before memes made it mainstream. These were ideas with endurance, picking up beads of cultural diversity, carrying motifs of industry and wealth along trade routes, transforming misunderstanding into tradition. Much like previous misconceptions found in old parchment and ink, these ant-shaped myths beguile us because they invite inquiry. Did traders embellish, motivated by hyperbolic yarn spinning, or were such creatures a convenient analog for riches retrieved from hidden places? Our love for framing the unfathomable continues, each tale rippling forward with inviting allure. So next time a fantastical tale crosses your path, tip your hat to those gold harvesting ants. Right or wrong, their busy legacy remains, and it twinkles just as enticingly across history's sandbox. As you ponder ancient Ethiopian stories echoing through time, you find yourself marveling at how these tales continue to influence modern perspectives on legends and historical storytelling. It's like the ancient world's version of a viral tweet, though, admittedly, with a bit more staying power than your average hashtag. Picture the scene. A clear Ethiopian sky overhead as you stretch out in your hammock, perhaps sipping a refreshing beverage. The gentle rustling of the wind through acacia trees plays like a lullaby in the background. You're here journeying through the annals of time, examining how stories of giant ants fetching gold still enchant and baffle even the most devoted historians. The allure of these stories isn't simply in their fanciful nature, but in how they reflect the deep-seated human inclination towards storytelling as a means of understanding the world. The ancient Ethiopians had a way of effortlessly blending the lines between myth and reality. This artful mingling wasn't mere whimsy, but a powerful tool for shaping culture and belief systems. When you consider this, it's hard not to wonder what tales we're spinning today that future generations might comb through with the same fascinated discernment. Historians still argue whether the ancient narratives about those giant, gold-digging ants serve as a metaphor for something more groundbound. A symbolic expression of the Ethiopian quest for prosperity or reflection on the industrious nature attributed to ants culturally. Whichever direction the truth skews, these stories have shown remarkable tenacity, almost like the ants themselves, in surviving through centuries, not just as relics of a bygone era but as living, breathing parts of a cultural tapestry. What makes these tales particularly interesting is their stark contrast to how we view gold today, a commodity heavily regulated and contemporary compared to the ancient days when myth and magic colored its allure. Now, we have historical records aplenty that offer perspectives on Ethiopia as a significant player in the gold trade, thanks to its geographical positioning and natural resources. This commercialization of gold was not always so distinctly separate from its mythic background. In the times of those ancient emperors and explorers, the tale of the golden ants was as tangible, as accessible, as any modern archaeological dig unearthing gold trinkets or ornaments. The quirky tidbit that incorporates this discussion stems from how these stories traveled as far and wide as the ancient trade routes themselves. Perhaps it was a tired, dusty traveler who first spun this tale in Greek agora or Egyptian courts, embellishing it with every retelling. And it certainly did stick. Somehow this particular myth drowned out more mundane explanations, elevating ants to a status typically reserved for more illustrious mythical creatures like dragons or griffins. I suppose we should be grateful that today's tales of ants don't grant them such outsized roles. Could you imagine your morning picnics otherwise? The way these stories echo through centuries points to a shared characteristic of legendary tales. They embody universal themes that resonate at various junctures of human history. For Ethiopians, and many others, they're a reminder of a rich heritage, where tradition and storytelling form the backbone of cultural identity. Where gold wasn't merely a glittering rock, but an embodiment of persistence, hard work, and, of course, a penchant for stories that pack a punch. This long-standing tradition of storytelling retains relevance in the modern era, casting light on the importance of narrative in shaping human understanding. And so, as you gently sway in reflection, consider that perhaps the staying power of these tales isn't solely because of their content, but also their nature as reflections of human experiences and anxieties. The past was a different world indeed, but not as dissimilar as you'd expect. Stories were the connective tissue, helping to frame a shared existence amidst unknown horizons. Much like our modern media, these ancient stories informed, entertained, and educated, often swathed in mystery, sometimes confusing, yet always compelling. So, next time you casually toss around the value of gold in conversation, whether in reference to finance, jewelry, or grandma's heirlooms, allow your mind a diversion down this peculiar historical rabbit hole or anthill. Remember that while today's myths may revolve around memes and viral videos, the fundamental human experience of crafting stories remains unchanged. These narratives, embroidered with the vibrant tapestries of our ancestors' imaginations, are where we find the roots of what it means to be human, curious, forever storytelling, repeatedly seeking meaning amidst the mundane and magical alike. On that golden note, let's take a moment to relish the captivating charm stories afford our imaginations. They carry us to worlds unknown, whispering past secrets just out of reach, creating continuity between the then and the now. These echoes from Ethiopia's storied past continue to rouse intrigue and a twinkle of whimsy and invitation, really, to ponder whether we too are leaving anything behind worth unraveling by future generations. As you rest your eyes, breathing in slowly and letting go of distractions, dream a little of gold-toting ants and the humans who crafted such vivid tapestries. Such is the gift these Ethiopian tales offer, a gentle seduction into the realms of sleep and dreams, bridging the mundane with the mythic in a timeless dance. And on that note, before sleep takes over, you might imagine you hear the faint clattering of tiny, gold-bearing feet, or perhaps that's merely the trick of a sleepy mind, weaving itself into the eternal tapestry of storied legacies. You find yourself closing your eyes, letting your imagination slip into that magical time between alertness and dreamland. Picture the gleaming African sun setting against the silhouette of rugged Ethiopian highlands. As the land cools, the myths we've wandered throughout this journey begin to blend into reveries, each one like a golden thread in a dreamy tapestry. You're surrounded by the low hum of nature's nocturnal symphony, crickets calling, gentle rustling leaves, and somewhere, the distant tinkling sound of goat bells. In this gentle state, think about those mythical gold-digging ants, which might be chuckling at the legend they've inspired. Imagine them scuttling industriously over the sun-warmed sands, their minute footsteps weaving an invisible path, pulling your attention back to a time when humans were willing to believe that such tiny creatures had the might to dig up the earth's treasures. This is an era when stories like these sparked curiosity, and honestly, who could blame them? Even today, the thought of eight-legged miners is more thrilling than a documentary about mining processes. Historians still argue whether the giant ants of legend were a mistranslation, a metaphor, or perhaps even the observer's misunderstanding of local burrowing creatures like the desert fox. Now, you can see a merchant traveling along an ancient Ethiopian trade route, perhaps chuckling about the wild stories he's heard. Did he really believe in the ants? Or was he another storyteller, passing on an embroidered myth? This road he walks, the same one that bore tales of gold, stretches further than we dreamers can see. Even the stars above, unblinkingly watching since time immemorial, might smile faintly at the tales as they weave their way through time. As you drift deeper into that comforting slumber, imagine the powerful kingdoms of Kush and Aksum, their prosperity entwined with the allure of glittering, sun-infused metal. The nights echo with tales of mystical finds, stories passed from fireside to fireside, father to son, each generation adding their own sparkle to the narrative. Perhaps they struggled with the same questions we do today. How much of our history is myth, and how much is gold standard fact? In this place between waking and dreaming, the ancient Ethiopian landscapes come alive beneath your relaxing eyelids. There's the gentle sway of golden grasses, the distant chattering of nocturnal birds, and above all, an ever-present, comforting hum of stories yet to be told. Every hill and crevasse is brimming with untold histories and unknown adventures. Those hikes over new terrains reveal secrets with each step, scattered like twinkling treasures over the vast Ethiopian expanses. And so, as your mind cozies into the night, these tales, wrapped in their golden hues, become companions in your rest. With each breath that relaxes you further into tranquility, let yourself ponder how time molds myth into firm beliefs, turns hearsay into history, and sometimes confuses an ant for an artist of the earth's riches. These ancient landscapes and legendary creatures serve as your lullaby carriage, carrying you gently into the land of dreams. So, allow yourself to inhale deeply, feel the soothing calm enveloping you, and know that these stories, just like the paths of those ancient gold trails, will be waiting to welcome you again, should you ever choose to return. Let the whispers of the past ease into silence, and the stories we've shared bloom in the quiet garden of your thoughts, swaying gently like evening shadows. As the last words wash away, your journey nestles warm in the comfort of night, inviting you to sink softly and completely into the embrace of restful peace. Ready to succumb to sleep's gentle pull, let the soft echoes of golden legends guide you beyond the horizon of dreams.